listeners, welcome to another great podcast session. I'm Shivani Muthyala. The pandemic has accelerated the digital transformation journey of IT industries. In the same process, deep tech, it is turning out to be a critical component that is growing into leaps and bounds, right? So, according to the recent industry report, 19% of all Indian startups have already started to leverage deep tech to build complex and innovative products and solutions across various industries. So, to elaborate more on the same front, we have Ashwin, who is the co founder and CTO of Acceldata, which is a deep tech startup that built the world's first enterprise data observability platform. So, why late then? Let's welcome our speaker for the day. Hi, Ashwin, how are you doing?
Hey, hi Shivani. Thanks for the opportunity and it's great to be here.
Pleasure to have you here in Analytics Insight platform. So, first of all, could you tell our listeners what Acceldata is all about?
Yeah, of course. So Acceldata is a 3-year-old company in the data observability space. Essentially, we help enterprises get more out of their data strategy by monitoring, analyzing, and making sure that the data investments which a lot of these enterprises are doing are always working as per design, and that their data teams do not spend a lot of time doing troubleshooting, firefighting, where we guarantee the uptime and the performance of the data system.
Great. Happy to know about Axel Data. And what are the specializations and the services that the company is actually offering to its clients?
Yeah, so in brief, the way you think about Excel data is that in the last, let's say, 7 to 8 years, there has been an explosion in data technology in general, right? So every company is now, undergoing some sort of digital transformation. And a key part of the digital transformation strategy is to have, a data strategy in itself. So every company, every organization, whether you're a, IoT company or an automotive company or an insurance company, shipping, medical, you can pick, any domain, is collecting more and more information through all of their data sources, is analyzing them in different ways, and then figuring out how it actually can use all this data to make more profits or to serve their customers better, right? And the winners are the companies who have done this best. So if you think of 10 years back, in 2001, which was the most valuable company, you had General Electric, you had General Motors, and now which is the most, valuable company? You have Apple, you have Google. And the difference here is that the way these companies have used data to their advantage has essentially shaped their success in the market, right? So every company wants to do it, but the problem is a little bit more challenging, right? So there are two aspects to it. One is that you have a set of technologies, and you can think of any big data technology, right? You had Hadoop, which is for on-prem. You have Snowflake and Databricks and machine learning, all sorts of technologies today. But like with any set of new technologies, people are not paying enough attention to the on how to operate these technologies. And a key part of operating any technology stack is observability. So Acceldata essentially builds three products, three capabilities in what we call the Acceldata data observability platform. Yeah, so Acceldata for its customers provides a data observability platform, which essentially has three components, right? So any data platform which any enterprise is going to implement essentially is an orchestration technology. So you can think of technologies such as Airflow, or some sort of an ETL technology like Spark. It's going to move a lot of data from a lot of disparate sources through some sort of a data pipeline, into some sort of a data lake where there'll be business analysts and different use cases which will be built on top of this data. So Acceldata tools, namely Pulse, Flow, and Torch, essentially monitor every single aspect of this information flow, right? So whether you're using a technology like Spark, which is essentially a distributed compute technology, Accelerator Pulse can integrate with that technology and give you insight about how your jobs are doing, how your applications are doing, and how you can actually tune their performance to achieve the best cost performance outcome ratio. It also looks at the data which is flowing through the different pipelines and tells you, hey, if this data is exactly how it's supposed to be, right? You could imagine that you're creating reports on top of which your business strategy will be decided. You would like to know whether these reports actually have data which is validated, which is valid and structured exactly how it's supposed to be. So one aspect of our software does exactly that. And the third aspect is to essentially get a overall picture of what's going on. Data pipelines for larger companies can be very complex piece. So we provide mechanisms, including software development kits or SDKs or APIs, in which they can integrate their different technologies, data pipeline technologies, into one platform where they can see all this information. The way you should think about it is that think of your data strategy as a large cargo ship, right, or a huge container ship. There's so many moving parts. There's the engine, there's the hull, there's the navigation technology, there's the radar technology. There's so many things to look at. What Acceldata does is it puts you into the control center. It gives you a command center for your data strategy, right? So you're the captain of this huge data strategy, and you have all the Acceldata tools you need. So you can figure out what's going on in which part of your organization or which part of your strategy has what sort of issues, and what is the remedy to actually go ahead and fix it. That's essentially what we do is we build a kind of a command center for data technologies for large enterprises.
That's amazing. And apart from the three specializations which you named, so what are the areas that the company is planning to expand upon?
Yeah, so what we have observed, and also from our experience and where the industry is going, there is a huge shift happening towards the cloud itself. So a lot of organizations, new and old, have realized that running their own data centers, running their own infrastructure is a very expensive game, and it also requires a lot of specialization, right? So just imagine, there's a bank in America, one of the foremost banks in America is now completely on AWS, right? Unimaginable 10 years back. So as this migration to the cloud happens, we as a company are also looking at primarily to support our customers into their journey to this cloud by bringing our tools to cloud native systems such as Redshift, Snowflake, Databricks, Elastic MapReduce, to name a few. And the second part, which we are quite bullish on, is the fact that the traditional way of doing things is changing. So where there was a lot of ETL, extract, transform, load, which used to happen using tools like Informatica, tools like Talent, a lot of new companies, a lot of new use cases are built on paradigms such as TLT, where you bring in raw data and transform it. So we are also, changing the way we create our tools to support this shift. So in one line, if I had to say where we are most bullish upon, essentially it's the cloud, and to make sure that Acceldata customers, both existing and prospective customers, see the same benefit that they see from our tools, whether they are on cloud, whether they are on-prem, or whether they are hybrid.
That's interesting about to know about. And technology has been taking over industries very rapidly, right? So especially when looking at the new tech trends, such as whether it be artificial intelligence or big data or analytics. So how is company leveraging these particular tech trends?
Yeah. So from where we stand, if you think of a data strategy, it is split into two parts, right? So you have the actual technology itself, and then you have business use cases which are built on top of it. So like you mentioned, something like AI will, you will use a multitude of technologies and tools, and something like Tensor, PyTorch, or any of the AI technologies to create models on top of some data, which may predict some outcome for you, right? But the key to doing all this is to have a very solid data strategy, right? So you need to make sure that you have accurate structured all the data, you have transformed it, and there is some notion of getting all this data into the right shape, right format, and right access, so that engineers and data scientists and data analysts can build the right models on top of it, right? So for us as a company, what we see a lot of our customers doing is that they're trying to experiment, right? There's a huge explosion in technology and they're trying to experiment. They want to do, what is what is latest in terms of machine learning, or let's say cost prediction, or in terms of optimizing some business process. But there are fundamental issues on how this has to be achieved, which stems from the fact that what data is it actually acting upon, right? Can I find enough talent to actually do this? So where we come in as a tech solution is to make sure that the data scientists, the data analysts who actually want to create advanced use cases have a good set of data to act upon. And how do we do it? We make sure that your data pipelines are running efficiently, they are providing you the right data, and they are not prohibitively expensive, right? So for us, it's to your question, for us, it's always one layer down where we are making sure that the data technology which is supporting all these use cases is running perfect.
Great. Happy to know how the company is, actually contributing to the growth of new tech trends. So, as we also spoke about, deep tech before, so how has been this particular technology adopted rapidly, and what are the deep tech trends, that are likely to see in the coming days, according to you?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I think the number one trend, especially in the data space, is the fact that a lot of workloads and use cases are now migrating to the cloud. And so, just thinking about it, 10 years back, for example, what was a company's data strategy? You essentially had some front-facing applications. So you can think of maybe let's say a ticket booking website, and there's a lot of activity which happens in the front end. And at certain points in time, you take some data from the back end, you create some sort of a batch process, you ship it through some, an Informatica job or a ETL job, SSIS job, into some sort of a database. And then you have something like a business reporting layer on top of it, right? And that was the be all end all of it. What we are seeing now as an emerging trend is that there's a lot of nimbleness in the way that this is done. So people are not just talking about batch process to create business reports, right? They're talking about real-time queries, right? So, for example, let's say you wanted a quote for your insurance, and when you go to the website and you say, "Hey, give me a quote," it actually is being powered by a data lake, right? Which historically has been essentially a batch process, something which you do offline. So what we are saying is, twofold. Number one is there's a lot of use cases where data technologies are front and center as a part of your offering itself, right? Whether it's finance, whether it's insurance, whether it's medical technology, whether it's credit, a lot of places where data technology is key and center. And number two is that a lot of these are driven directly from the cloud. So essentially, any new age company. So we have in India, Navi, which is a fintech which is offering home loans. All of their technology is now on the cloud. It's real time, including their data technology. And looking a little bit forward, far ahead in the future, we also see newer paradigms such as data mesh, etc., coming up. But with like every technology adoption cycle, we believe it's still too for larger enterprises to adopt, right? So we are talking about whether a shipping line or a healthcare company, right, will adopt this. We think it's still somewhat 5 years down the line. But the migration to cloud and integration into real-time use cases is happening as we speak.
Very rightly spoke about the cloud, and what are the techs that have coming in the near future. So what is the current scenario of deep tech startups in India according to you?
Yeah, I think things are actually improving. So the biggest I think problem I wouldn't call it a problem is the difference is in the way that people look at it, right? So there is a fundamental difference in different types of companies that you can build, right? And the way I look at it is you can build two types of companies or startups. One is essentially to digitize some sort of a business process, right? So if you want to get some insurance, earlier you had a person who used to come, used to sign some forms. and then you used to get your insurance maybe 10 days later. But now you have a company like Acco. Everything is done digitally, including getting quotes from different vendors, their own insurance solution, and in maybe 10 minutes you have your insurance quote. The other set of companies which you can build is in pure technologies, where there is no real physical or a physical process that which you can duplicate into your software. So where the value has to be derived from the software itself. And Acceldata is one such startup. So our proposition to any company is saying that, hey, data is central to your strategy as a company, and you're investing a lot of money into data platforms. We are great at building software which can monitor your data platform and tell you how you can do it better. Now, this is something which is difficult. Number one, difficult to convey, right? Difficult to position, difficult to convince customers unless there is a larger movement around it, and that has somehow happened in the data observability space. And of course, it's hard to talk about it to prospective employees and investors, etc. So I think over the years, there has been a lot of friction in terms of can you actually build a pure tech startup out of India? I'm happy to report that, from especially the earlier investors that we have spoken to, and even a lot of new age Indian startups are aware of that, they need such solutions, right? And there are people still willing to kind of put in investment. There are people willing to join us at early stages, but it's nowhere as simple especially in India. It is much easier to, let's say, start a company which translates a physical process into a digital one, because people, I think, have a natural understanding for these things, right? And it's easy to see how in a country like India that this thing can generate value. But in especially in deep tech, it has always been a challenge that what is the path towards profitability or path towards massive growth upside and potential. That's something which was, the market for it or the appetite for it usually is largely still exists in the valley, but things are getting better in India. So there's an ecosystem of people who are building deep tech, and there are people who understand it and also willing to invest.
Wonderful. Thanks for elaborating on that front, Ashwin. So, in the same context, how do you think deep tech startups can actually solve present day's demands? Even because now present day demands are growing day by day. So, how can they actually solve the present day's demands at the same time contribute to the country's growth?
That's a great question. I think the number one thing which founders and people who are thinking of starting a deep tech company should remember is that it's going to be a tough first few years, right? Because getting the cycle of startups is such that there is a lot of urgency, especially in a field like ours, where the only metric is logo growth, right? Or revenue growth. There is no other metric which we can provide. So this is not a mobile app where you can say, hey, I have 100,000 people engaging on my platform. There is no such metric. So the only metric which works is actually logo growth or to have customer growth. And when you think about how do you actually build a good product, ideally you should have some sort of customer feedback which you take. You should have a customer pain point, or you would have faced a pain in your working career, and you solve it. So if you think about it, this is a catch-22 situation, right? You need to have a product to get the customer, and then you need to have a customer which gives you enough feedback, or a pool of customers, or a lighthouse customer which gives enough feedback that you can build a product which that you can then sell globally. So the first few years of actually building a deep tech startup are generally tough, right? And that is something which you have to be prepared for. And especially in the modern day, when you get into a kind of a startup mindset, you realize that the time to value which people are looking for is quite low, right? So everybody expects that, hey, like the other company before you need to grow 3x year on year. Meanwhile, building product, meanwhile, building, talking to customers, meanwhile, growing, doing all sorts of marketing around it. And that can be quite tough. And my approach to this has been that founders need to keep their head down, keep working, make sure that you build meaningful product, which is valuable to at least a few large enterprises, that you can show that you can actually run a business. And I think everything follows from that. Revenue trumps everything, customers trump everything. So once you get over that initial hurdle where the technology is not necessarily 100% ready, maybe you have a small pool of customers and the finances are a little bit hard, I think it becomes a little easier, but it is still a challenge, but it's far easier once you cross the first hump. On the second, I think part of your question where, how do you actually contribute to the growth of the country in general? I think there are two ways to look at it. Number one is that India in general, I think more than anywhere in the world, has an excellent pool of talent and hardworking, honest talent. So you can get excellent engineers in India who know the work. They probably need a little bit of guidance and structure, but largely they can deliver to the highest levels, as is evident from the recent IPOs of Freshworks and many other companies where Indian engineers have played a key role. But it's not, the business aspect of it is necessarily not there. So for example, the primary market for us as a company, Acceldata, is still selling to American companies or global companies, because Indian companies, apart from the few top 5 companies, don't really have an appetite for newer software, right? Or trying new things. Whereas an American company or a global company, or even in parts of Asia, there are enterprises and there are teams who are willing to try new things. So the way I think we contribute in terms of growth, especially in an Indian context, is that we run most of our R&D from here, because you can find excellent engineers, especially in a startup. You have to be a little bit cost sensitive, and we can find engineers who can do work at the highest level without having to put the company in specifically a cash crunch situation, because the compensation cycles are too high compared to many other places in the world.
Great. Happy to know how Acceldata is, actually contributing to a lot of developments, and, how did the pandemic accelerate the growth in deep tech adoption? Because the pandemic has hit, very hard, looking at all the industries. So, what is your stand on this?
Yeah, good question. I think what happened in the early days of the pandemic is there was a lot of confusion on how long will it last and what the severity of this is. Right? So luckily for, I think, all of us, even though it has been a major shock to systems worldwide, the severity of the pandemic is far lesser than what people anticipated it to be, right? There have been a lot of people who have lost their lives. There have been a lot of, distress worldwide. But I think people expected far, far worse when this began. So in 2020, early 2020, there was this massive dip everywhere, right? So there was like doomsday predictions coming out of capital investors, from the markets, from everywhere. And then when people realized that this is a controllable situation, not something which is going to spiral out of control, I think they took some additional steps to kind of make sure that people and companies actually survive. And what ended up happening is that, especially companies, any company which helped transition into a more remote way of working, right? Whether it is, can you do meetings remotely, right? In our case, can you actually support systems remotely? Do you have enough tools which can tell you what's going on, so you don't need feet on the ground, right? So any company or any organization which had offerings in the space where it helps reduce the people coming together in one place to actually conduct business, I think that's kind of skyrocket. And this trend has been coming for a long time. So you think of digital transactions, you can think of fintech, you can think of insurance, you can think of communications. There are very few processes in which you are required to be physically present. And with the coming of the pandemic, people realize that this needs to happen now at 5x the speed that it was happening before. So a lot of capital has flown into companies, startups especially, who are into this sort of the business. We are somewhere in the middle, right? We are not necessarily a Zoom, which is basically saying, okay, you don't need to, fly, but you can just get onto a call. But we still have aspects in which companies can run their business better, and they don't need two, three, four people to sit in the data center, right? That's the software we create, which sits in the data center and helps you essentially debug what's going on. So with the coming of the pandemic, I think what's essentially happened is that any company which was helping people reduce boots on the ground essentially had a sudden influx of liquidity once people realized that the situation is not so bad. And that has led to now, I think, a permanent emergence of these patterns where, unless it's necessary, people are going to try to do things remote, whether it's offices or customer support. I think people have realized that a lot of it is much far more efficient that you have people working from anywhere in the world but contributing to a common cause.
Very rightly explained, Ashwin. So, in the same context, what is the role of Acceldata in enabling Indian enterprise, to deliver deep operational insights and also to modernize seamlessly?
Yeah, I think if you can think of us as an enabler, right? And the enabler in a very specific, narrow area. So as Indian enterprises tend to, want to go global, they would need to compete with what I call the masters of, data technology. So you can think of the largest Indian bank, let's say HDFC or ICICI. And in order to kind of gain customers, have better customer experiences, or even compete globally, if their ambitions dictate so, they need to have a very strong data strategy. And in this strategy, they might choose to, use many of the same set of tools that a lot of other companies essentially use, right? So, setting up a data strategy, setting up a data lake, having a lot of ingestion technologies who brings in this data and then doing some sort of analysis on this data to gain competitive advantage. As they go on this journey, I think we are an excellent partner. Number one, because we are, almost all of the founding team comes from a very strong data background. So we have worked in companies like Cottonworks, and others, where we have seen firsthand on how this is applicable to global companies. And I think especially to the Indian enterprise, we have the expertise, we have the knowledge to, number one, help them make the right decisions on what is the set of technologies that they should choose as they decide to go global. Number two is that, uh, have the product tooling and have the set of technologies at your disposal, which can actually help you achieve that data strategy. And we have seen that. So for us, one of our largest customers is actually based right here in Bangalore. So we work with a company called PhonePe. PhonePe is probably the largest payments provider right now in India, largest UPI payments company in India. And they are Acceldata customers, right? So I believe that as Indian companies, especially newer age startups, when they kind of start going global and they start looking at how important it is to have some sort of a strategy which gives them competitive advantage over others globally. Data is an essential part of it. And what do you do with your data? And I think Acceldata can help Indian enterprises to get the most out of whatever data strategy that you use, whether it's on-prem, whether it's on cloud, or some sort of a hybrid technology.
That's amazing. And how do you see the future of deep tech, especially in India?
Yeah, I think the future is bright. There are a lot of companies being built out of India targeting global customers, and not just in enterprise data technology like us, right? So we have companies in crypto. We have companies coming out in consumer tech. We have companies coming out in ed tech specifically. So we have technology coming out of many sectors in India, and a lot of these companies are in core technical areas, right? So I think the future is very bright. With the rider that I think in the next 10 years, a lot of this consolidation will happen. So you have a lot of companies. I think last year was 28 unicorns in the last 1 year, in this 1 year alone, right? So like with every good thing, I think there are going to be ups and downs. So if you just consider a decade, I think the future looks good, but there's going to be a lot of ups and downs in the coming years. And I think the best set of companies with solid product strategies, with well-paying, customers and a loyal customer base are going to survive in the long term, even if in the short term you have a huge explosion of companies coming up with newer and newer use cases.
Yes, definitely, and optimistically looking forward, to the future. So, thank you so much, Ashwin. It was pleasure talking to you. Hope all our listeners have gained, a lot of valuable insights from this session, and looking forward to see even more innovative solutions coming up from Acceldata's end. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Shivani. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I hope to do this again soon. Thank you.
Sure. So, listeners, stay tuned for more such interesting podcasts. Thank you. See you all again very soon.